How you doing today? This is my great-grandparents, Walter and Marie Joyce. I'm up here at St. Anne's Cemetery in Castle Shannon, Pennsylvania. I'm on a hillside, so the angle of the gravestone is so hard to get a good angle on with the tripod, but I guess I'm just going to have to improvise and make do with what I got. So, when it comes to Walter and Marie Joyce here, Walter and Marie were both from the south side of Pittsburgh. They were both born and raised most of their life in the south side. Walter, right here, was born in 1894, and I hope to get a good angle on when he was born. So he was born on July 11th, 1894 in Southside. He was 100% Irish, and Marie was born October 1st, 1898 in the South Side. She was 100% German. So, as for both of them, yins are probably wondering how a son of Irish immigrants and a daughter of assimilated German Southsiders, Charles and Minnie Riebel, how would they meet? Because the ethnic segregation was still going on in the early 1900s. So how would these people meet? How would they get married? And what was the reasoning all behind it? Because an Irishman and a German woman, it's not pretty common. You usually stuck with your ethnicity when it came to relationships and marriage back in those days. So, as it pertains to Walter, his nickname was Scrappy. And Marie Elizabeth Riebel, her birth name was Mary Elizabeth, but she went by the name Marie. Well, Scrappy was the oldest Joyce child of Martin and Bridget Joyce from Ireland. And Scrappy was a fighter. Scrappy was very, let's just say, in the terms of being just a rough rouser and a delinquent when he was younger, going into bars, fighting, drinking, And Marie, her parents, Charlie, and Minnie Riebel owned what is now Chipka's One on the corner of South 27th and Jane. Now, Walter, which is Scrappy, he hung out at Riebel's bar on the corner of South 27th and Jane. Scrappy was all over the place in Southside, always drinking at all the bars and hanging out back in, say, 1910 to 1915, 1916. So he became familiarized and became acquainted with the Riebels based on drinking at Riebel's bar on South 27th and Jane. So, when Scrappy met Marie at the bar, at Riebel's bar, which is now Chipka's One, they encountered each other and basically got acquainted because of the bar. And now Scrappy being an Irishman and Marie being a German, you would think that would have deterred them from getting together, but, he was 21 years old and she was 16 years old when they ran away to get married. And they both ran away in 1916, and she was pregnant, by the way, and they ran away down to West Virginia and got married in 1916, and then she gave birth to my grandfather Mooch's oldest brother, Walter, in 1917. So she was a couple months pregnant when they got married. Now, he was Catholic. She was Catholic, but she was also raised Lutheran, so she was half Catholic, half Lutheran. Don't get me started. The Germans are weird like that. And so they lived in Southside from the 19 teens, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. Scrappy, which is Walter Joyce, my great-grandfather, worked at Jones and Laughlin Steel Mill. During the 1930s, he really wasn't laid off and really wasn't he was laid off for a couple weeks at a time throughout the year and bits and pieces throughout the year, but he was able to keep his job at J&L. They lived all over the place. They never really owned a house per se because most of the residents of Southside back in the early 1900s, back in the early 20th century, they were mostly renters. They didn't really own property. It was kind of uncommon to own a house at that time. So my great-grandparents, Walter and Marie, kind of jumped everywhere. They lived on Sarah Street, they lived on Carson Street, they lived on Jane Street, but they primarily settled in a house on 2708 Jane Street, which is considered the neighborhood. That is where the bar was. That is where all of the neighbors were. I mean, these people grew up in that section, like 27th and Jane. That was their neighborhood. That was my ancestors' neighborhood, like I said many times, for decades. Actually, for close to a century at the time in the 40s. So, Walter, which Scrappy, and Marie, they lived and they raised their children. Their 7 children. Well, they had total 7 children, but 6 lived to adulthood because Walter, my grand uncle, died when he was 7 years old, 1924. But they raised their children in Southside. They all went to Holy Cross Roman Catholic school for grade school, and then most of the boys dropped out of South High School and wanted to work at Jones and Laughlin J&L Steel Mill with their father Scrappy, because Scrappy didn't graduate high school, neither did Marie. I mean, you went to the mill, you worked, and that's what Scrappy did. Scrappy encouraged his boys, okay, if you're going to drop out of high school, if you're going to drop out of South High School, I require you to work at J&L with me and make money and be a man, which that's what they did. But then World War II came around in the 40s, and the Joyces are living on 2708 Jane Street, and my grand uncles Kenny and Reed were the first to enlist in and during World War II. Kenny went to the Army, Reed went to the Marines, and they both served in the Pacific Theater. But as for my grandfather Jerome Mooch Joyce, he enlisted later. He dropped out of South High School, worked at J&L with Scrappy, decided he didn't really want to do that. He wanted to get into the Navy. He wanted to get into the war like all of the neighborhood kids, like all of his cousins, all of his friends, everybody in Southside in the neighborhood at the time. If you were like 16 to 26 years old, your duty, your responsibility was to go in the military and serve in the war. So my grandfather Mooch was basically forced, peer pressured in a way, not peer pressure, but basically forced as an obligation to serve his country, which he didn't do it as like, oh, it's a burden. He did it because he wanted to do it. Now, many yins watching this video, you're going to recognize some of the names and some of the neighborhood friends and family members that Scrappy and Marie are related to. Marie's oldest sister, my great aunt Helen, her married name is Roach. So if you yins know the Roaches of Southside, if yins know that family and that name on Josephine Street, that is Marie's nephews and grandnephews. Their last name was Roach. They were the Roaches. And you're going to know the name Seddon. Those also a Rebel name. That's also my great-grandmother Marie's side of the family, the Seddons. And Scrappy's family. Many yins probably won't know Scrappy's family, but when in the early 1950s, when Scrappy retired from J&L, I'd say from 1950, 152, somewhere around there, they moved here in Castle Shannon, and they moved into a house on Connor Road, 1045 Connor Road. And after he retired, he worked at J&L for like 40 plus years. He started working there when he was a kid, when he was like 8 or 9, because he dropped out of Holy Cross, I think, he might have made it to 8th grade, so he might have been 10, 11, 12. You never know. Back then, in the early 1900s, boys did not go to school. Boys, if you were a young boy, you didn't want to go to school. You wanted to make money. You wanted to be an adult. You wanted to be like your father. And you were encouraged by your father back in those days, like Scrappy's father, Martin. You were encouraged to work and make money and provide for the family. So Scrappy retired in the early 1950s from J&L. They lived on Connor Road in Castle Shannon, and that is where they would live until the day he died in December 16th, 1968. And then Marie moved in with my grandaunts in Baldwin, and then she died on May 14th, 1978. I could see it in my head. It's amazing. I could take pictures of it. But this is in essence my great grandparents, and I wanted to introduce yins because these are prominent Southsiders. They were born, raised, and lived most of their lives in Southside. They come from very prominent Southside families. They were part of the neighborhood. They were friends with like the Dushes. If you know the Dushes, that's Scrappy's friends. The Cresses, that's Scrappy's friend. The Mulhollans, Scrappy's friend. I mean, all of these German names. And by the way, side note, Scrappy was very diverse and very open-minded with his friendships and with the other ethnicities in Sassai. Because it was a neighborhood. You didn't segregate, you didn't discriminate. I mean, it was what it was. You got the Polish, you got the Slovaks, you got the Germans, you got the Italians. I mean, it is the neighborhood. This is Pittsburgh. We're not New York, who of the olden days, who discriminates on every little difference. Scrappy was friends with a lot of people, especially Germans, and that's probably why he flirted with the fact that Marie was a German. I mean, he had no problem with it. He was desensitized by it. When you're friends with the Dusches, the Cresses, and a bunch of other Germans, you're not going to really care that she's a Rebel, that she is a German. But regardless, this is in essence my great-grandparents up here at St. Anne's Cemetery in Castle Shannon. Walter and Marie Joyce, very prominent, very honorable Sassiders. And I just wanted to introduce Yins to them and wanted to highlight their lives because I feel that they contributed in many ways to who I became. Not only my grandfather Mooch or my dad Joe, but also me as the suburban Yinzer. I can say that I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for what they did decades ago. So thank Yins so much for everything you did. And anyway, peace out. Have a good day.